Whether you're new to town or just starting out or trying to get back out there after COVID, getting connected and making waves in your local scene can be incredibly helpful for your music career. And in today's episode, we're going to talk about all of that. So let's get to it. Hey there, and welcome to episode number 322 of the CD Baby DIY Musician Podcast, where on today's episode, we're going to be discussing breaking into your local music scene. My name is Kevin Bruner, and joining me is Christina Cano and Chris Robley. How are you two doing? Good to have you. Good to be here with you.
Great. Have we ever done a 3-person podcast before?
I think we did.
Once?
Like the three of us, I think we've done it once or twice.
Yeah.
I'm excited.
But, back in the day, Chris, this was a 3-person show.
Oh, that's true. It started as one. Yep.
Yes. We even went to 4 at one point.
That's true.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know
Got to
that.
dig down and deep
Way
into the
back
archives.
in 2007.
We were so young and impressionable back then.
Hey, and relevant to the topic, all 3 of us have broken into, or at least tried to break into, multiple scenes and cities throughout our lives. So,
yeah, I think this is going to be a great discussion, and why I wanted both of you on this episode, because we have all done this in different locations and to different degrees of results and maybe key learnings. So I think it's going to be an interesting discussion. I think if you're an artist that's, coming out of COVID, you might have had some things going, but feel like you're starting over because all the venues are different or all the contacts turned over and it feels like you're starting over. Or if you've moved to a new town, I've got that request for this episode by an artist that had moved to LA and was like, how do I even break into the scene here?
Was that me?
No,
it
was not you. It was not you.
I've got questions too.
And then, or if you're just starting out, the thing I love about the information that we have for you today is that it all feels extremely actionable. And there's a lot of things you can go do and start doing today while you're listening to this episode to start making more advances in your local scene and getting better connected and having a better support system and outlet to play and people to collaborate with in your hometown. Yeah. So it's going to be a good one. Hey, before we get into all that, I want to remind you that if you aren't subscribed to the episode, please hit that subscribe button, whether you're listening on a podcast app or in Spotify, or if you're watching on YouTube, be sure to hit that subscribe button. And in YouTube, there is the notification bell. Hit that and it'll make sure that you are aware whenever we post new episodes. And we've got some bonus content running down the feed as well, stuff from our DIY Musician Conference from earlier this year. So you don't want to miss out on that. And today we're going to be discussing how to break in your scene. We've got all sorts of different pieces of that, like the early research, entry points for various genres and what kind of home base you want to build. We're going to get into all that. We've got calls and emails. We've got an artist horror story. We've got a lot of good stuff coming up in this episode. And as a reminder, if you want to weigh in on a topic or ask a question, you can do so by calling our listener line at 360-524-2209 or email us at podcast@cdbabypodcast.com. All right.
Okay.
So how do we want to start this off? I mean, we're going to be talking about breaking into a local scene, and we're going to take it from the perspective of somebody that's like starting from scratch. Because even if you've done it before, like I know that I've done it with one band and then started a different band and, had to do it all over again with a different project, which also had different genre focuses and there's different cities. I mean, so I feel like we can just start from scratch.
Hey, I'll start with a confession. I don't know what the term would be. I find this topic, I find doing this, trying to make connections, trying to prove myself, trying to meet people, terrifying.
Yeah.
And essentially all 3 of us meet people for a living. We go to conferences for work. But when it comes to my own music, I'm like, I just feel like a little boy again who has no power. And I'm like wanting to get a good grade on the test.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I'm just saying that. So if anyone's listening that and you feel terrified, that's completely normal.
I mean, it's super paralyzing having to like completely be your number one champion. We're all champions for each other here, and even having a band, like your bandmates are, yes, they're your champions, but like you are ultimately your number one cheerleader, and it's tough. It's tough to be like, hey, I'm new in town and I'm cool. Which I've done a lot of
trust
times.
me. Trust me.
Just
I'm
trust
so cool.
me. Trust me.
Yeah. Very, very hard.
I'm gonna be huge, and so you want to get on this wave right now from the beginning.
Kiss my butt.
You were on the trend before it was cool.
Ground floor.
So yeah. So it is terrifying. Let's acknowledge that. I already said that a lot of this information is incredibly actionable, meaning there's not a lot of barriers to just start right now doing some of this today. However, you are putting yourself out there, and that can be terrifying. I think as artists, we need to acknowledge that probably more than we do, because I know that all the music business advice out there, I mean, we give a lot of advice as well, but we come from the artist perspective. So I think we recognize some of these things, but oftentimes all this information gets thrown at artists like there's no personal capital involved for them. It's just like marketing widgets. And it's like, no, this is me.
This is me, my money, my time, my reputation.
My creative work, my art, the outpouring from my soul, and they're going to judge me for every piece of it. And that's terrifying.
Well, I was thinking like maybe a place to start would be to acknowledge that in any endeavor, you generally go through sort of an apprenticeship phase. It's like you don't just jump into being an electrician. You got to go to school, or you got to work with someone who teaches you the ways. And there's almost like a going to school version of breaking into a scene too. Like, don't start off by trying to just get a gig and play an amazing show. Do your research and like really commit to, I don't know, a few months, half a year, a full year of just doing the work. Go to shows, get familiar with the local blogs and the weeklies and who writes the column and, all that sort of stuff. Just investigate your scene before you try to make a stamp on it.
I love the idea of investigating your scene. Also apprenticeship, like finding a band to play with before you try to completely break out on your own in a new city, or finding somebody who's already working and basically like following them around and seeing what it is that they're doing and learning from their experience is a great way to start of get at least your foot in the right first door,
Yeah. So for our first point of like, hey, take some time, do some research, 6 months of research or 3 months, but do some research. Here's some tips. One, go to shows, see who's playing, see who's drawing a crowd, see who, it's very easy to observe a lot of relationships and other things happening in the room when you go to shows, see what bands tend to play with each other, who are friends and all that. 2, read the weeklies. Chris mentioned that, but every town usually has like a weekly newspaper, entertainment focused. Here in the Portland, Oregon area, there's 2 that of these weekly zines. I'm sure, and depending on what city you live in, that could vary, but those always are going to be a good source of information about what's going on in the scene. Online blogs, playlists, TikTok, anything related to your local scene, investigate those, go follow them, start participating. And then, Chris, number 4, you had ask the barber, the bookstore clerk, the bartender.
True.
I'm actually I'm serious about that one, because when I moved to Portland, Oregon, I actually felt like I did all the other stuff. I went to shows, read the weeklies, but I felt like just sitting in, like getting my hair cut and being like, hey, who do you listen to? Who do you think is cool? Maybe I think it really worked super well, but really what happened is I just lived in a place for a couple of years and absorbed it. But that was part of absorbing what was happening.
It's becoming a connoisseur of the culture from the locals, basically. Like, you're going to a new town, you're going to ask people, what is it that you're ingesting? Where is it that you're ingesting it? Like, what's the scene? What is the scene? Yeah,
another place that's not on this list that's a good spot to do research is go to the cool music stores in your town. And I'm talking about the ones selling instruments, not like vinyl stores. The vinyl stores are great too, but because our musicians tend to hit up music stores pretty regularly, and chances are those folks are going to have a certain pulse on the scene of like who's playing a lot, who are the people in town worth connecting with. So yeah, that's a good start. And like I said, all those things are actionable today. Like, go create you don't have to create a spreadsheet, but you can create like a bookmark folder of all the venues in your town that would potentially be a fit for you. You can start organizing that information, start looking at their calendars and all that kind of stuff.
So funny, because when I think all three of us had a time, even though we don't all live in Portland anymore, we had a time where Portland, Oregon, at a certain time was when we broke in, right? And for me, it was MySpace era. And
Mhm.
so it was finding other artists that were playing in town, stalking them on MySpace, sending them messages and saying, hey, can I open for you? Like, that was the move for me. But I didn't know them at all, and some of them were like playing big shows, and I had the balls as like a singer-songwriter with absolutely like not much more than like open mic experience to be like, let me open for you. And I remember one of them sending me an email or a message back saying like, my booking agent actually manages all my booking, but here's some advice on like how to get shows. So that person ended up sucking later. I knew them later.
I was going to ask if the advice was helpful or condescending.
Or if the advice was like, don't ever do this again.
The advice was helpful, but then as soon as I started getting to the point where I'm playing the same shows as this person, they were not very kind to me. But when I was a nobody, they were really nice. All that to say that there's definitely like, everybody's reachable. Like, everybody in your scene is, I say this all the time about everyone everywhere. Like, you can get a hold of a famous person. It's not that hard. You can get a hold of your local cool guy very easily and ask them, where do I play? How do I get started? It's not hard.
Well, you mentioned asking advice of other artists. I like that because every city is going to have, their core venues, and they're all going to have some quirks that are unique to them based on who's booking the venue. So we've had way in the years past had the booker from the Doug Fir Lounge on the podcast, and would say that there was some very specific strategies that connecting with her that worked, and some very specific ones that would get you never would make sure you never took a spot on that stage. And so it's like asking other bands some of that feedback about how they're getting gigs as well is helpful, because there are those quirky people that, or just how they like to receive information or when they're available, or, so asking other artists is a good idea as well.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to say before we move on is just a lot of what we're saying probably sounds like we're talking about big towns where there are tons of options. I've done that with Oregon in Portland. To me, it was a big town. It's about 1 million people there. Then I moved to a town of 35,000. It's a tiny place with, comparatively very little going on musically. So how you break into a town like that is very different, but it still did, even though way fewer venues, way less going on, it required a different kind of work, but a lot of work all the same. You just sort of have to meet town council people and local business owners and stuff who will invent gigs for you. But it's not a musical infrastructure. You kind of more have to just meet the people.
Yeah.
I do think, though, that regardless of whether it's the small town of 35,000 or 100 or 30 million or whatever, there's still a need to create a professionalism that you carry with you from the beginning. So establishing what type of professional you're going to be, making sure that everything is consistent, making sure that you're sending emails that are coherent with links to your music, with information, with your bio information, and, some sort of a promise of a guarantee, like a promise that you'll at least bring 30 people or whatever.
Or
like,
I just promise not to suck or be so drunk I fall off the stage.
And just knowing that you can send a professional email, whether it's to the town council or to the Doug Fir booker, like, that doesn't just completely give off red flags. You don't know what the frick you're doing.
Yeah, I think the point about a small town is a good one. Like Chris mentioned, Portland, Oregon, where the three of us have done a lot of playing in over the years, is probably like an average mid-size U.S. city, but in small towns, there'll be venues, there'll be places. They may not be the cool concert venue, but you also have to look at it. Where are the opportunities for me? So it's not just about looking at like those weeklies or understanding what's happening in your local city of like, where are the bands playing that I want to be playing with? It could also be, where are people gathering that there's untapped opportunity that in this small town environment, I could start playing in front of people or start building a scene, or maybe organizing some local musicians. So that's why a lot of the research is helpful. It's like doing the research and going, okay, I've got the information now. What is the strategy of how I break in? Knowing now that I know what's going on here, because that's really what the research part is like, to understand what's going on so you can create a strategy that builds your career and isn't just wasting your time. And that kind of leads into the next point we have. Chris, if you want to take that.
Yeah, so once you've done a bunch of research about your town, you may have also discovered that every genre has its own sort of unique culture and entry point into performing. So if you're a singer-songwriter, there might be open mics, there might be sort of coffee house residencies, that sort of thing. If you're in hip hop, there might be like rap battles and stuff. If you're a heavy metal or hard rock band, I notice a lot of towns will have like battle of the bands, or those like god awful like 6-band bill type of nights from like who wants to stack this many bands in one place. But for some reason in metal and rock, that's a thing. Then there's also like opening slots where you keep your eye on the local calendar and you think, oh, that artist kind of is like me, maybe I can do that. There's also in the rounds. This is sort of usually a singer-songwriter type thing as well. There's Irish jams, there's bluegrass jams, there's the crappiest night of the week where the club will take a chance on unknown people who have no fans yet, Sunday night, Monday night, something like that. And then also, if you can't find any place to play, you can invent your own concert experience. Like if there's a local boutique clothing shop or a church or a bookstore, any of these sorts of places you can approach and say, hey, can I do a show here?
Anecdotally, I remember when first moving to Portland, starting to play shows, playing open mics or playing the Mississippi Pizza Pub, which is literally just a pizza parlor with a piano in it. And, you'd have like
pizza.
3 people and they were your boyfriend's parents like coming out to see you play and whatever. You're still building your fan base. You don't really have that yet. And so it's really hard to get like a bigger venue at a certain point because you're just still like putting your feet in the water or whatever if you're just starting out. That it would be things like storytelling nights, or like variety shows or like poetry nights where they're like, oh, we need an artist to perform a song or whatever. Those were the most engaging audiences. House shows are absolutely the best way to break into a scene, I believe. And so a lot of these like sort of alternative house shows that had like storytelling or poetry or theater or whatever, those were the best ones because those audiences were like so engaged. They're sitting there listening. They're not just like drinking in the corner and like judging you. They're just like, oh, we're here to make space. And so those people are the most engaging, and those are the ones that would end up starting to build that audience so that then you finally could play the smaller to mid-size, then mid-size to larger. And like some of those audiences stuck with me for over 2 decades, like, a very, very long time, people that met you at the house show. So
yeah, that's true. And when you say house show, I think of like folk singer-songwriter house show, but there's also garage rock shows and basement avant-garde noise rock. And, it's like just something at home. It can be any genre. It's just someone's hosting it at their home.
Yeah. And that's why I think it's important to do that investigative work, because a lot of these aren't going to show up on your Entertainment Weekly zine is a club listing. It's going to be something that people in the scene know happens on certain nights or at a certain place. I know for a while in Portland, there was a house that always had house shows. And by house, I think this was, we played there once. It was barely a house.
It was condemned almost, right?
Let's just say I went to use the bathroom and I felt like every prison toilet in America was probably cleaner than what I was seeing in there. It was quite the scene. I wasn't sure what was going on at this house, but it was a place where it was kind of this known underground venue.
I mean, I once played at a nude painting studio that was hosting like a storytelling night at once a month.
So many questions that
I mean, it was like the sort of place where, like, you know, they just like paint people naked, but there wasn't anyone naked there. But that was like, you know, why would you ever think that's where I'm going to play a show? But it turns out that sort of place loves you and will invite you to play every month. And all the people that actually painted that studio are also rich and they will buy your albums. So like, it's finding these communities that aren't even just the music communities, those audiences that exist that are absorbing entertainment elsewhere. Like, they're the ones to really invest in as well. And
I think it's important to understand that there's a strategy here. The strategy is not just to fill your calendar with subpar gigs, because a lot of these are not going to be amazing gigs. You could stumble into some of them. Like the crappiest night of the week, it was one thing where when I was playing in Hello Morning here in the Portland scene, we knew somebody who the venue, it was a very sought after venue, but they gave this music brand that night to curate once a month because, you know, they didn't want to be hassled having to book a Tuesday night. And we ended up doing it with a couple other bands, and it was a great turnout. And so while it was the crappiest night of the week, it was a good entry point into that venue. Then we now had a resume to say, hey, we've played here already. Right. We played on the crappiest night of the week and we did okay. Or you're trying to build the story that you are playing in the local scene. And so to me, it's important that you don't just go, I'm just playing this crappy gigs. I can't get anything better. Think strategically. Okay, get some photos, get some video. And you know, you need to start populating things like your website and social that show that you're playing in the scene, because that's part of it, is establishing yourself as being someone that's in the scene. Because when you go to get that better venue, they're going to look at that stuff and they're going to want to know if you've been playing. They don't necessarily want to give a chance on somebody that's never played before.
Mm-hmm. There's a note on here that says there might be that one club in quotes. And I think maybe Kevin added that and so I'm taking that two ways. One, there could be that one club that everyone says, oh, you got to play there because it's the hippest, coolest place. But that's also going to be a harder place to get into. There's also might be that one club that's really trashy and easy to get into, but is worth doing because it's just a launching point and they're welcoming. They don't expect you to bring in 50 people on your first gig. They don't give you crap if you're not amazing. You know, like for us, we had the Ash Street and the Tonic Lounge. Street.
For me, it was, do you remember Ellis Street?
Oh, yeah.
That place was awesome because it was like this underground basement pub bar type thing that was underneath of like an old mortuary or something and turned lawyer's office. I don't know. But it was this venue that maybe only existed for like 5 years or so. But you could play, you know, Tuesday night, your set's at 11. No one's staying, but it's okay because like 5 people in that room will make it feel full. And the bartenders are so engaged. And it was just a really great place to go explore. If you're writing a song that day, you can go play it that night and start working your chops, you know?
Yeah. No one listening cares about this, but is that the place that's where the soccer stadium is?
Yeah.
Okay. I definitely played there.
Yeah. I loved that place.
Yeah, the Ash Street in Portland was that club that any starting band could get a gig. They just had this sound person who booked the bands and just loved independent bands. Right. And it was kind of a divey place, but it had a good stage. And it was right next door to one of the other rock clubs that had national acts and local bands. So there was people around and it was just such an amazing place to, you know, everybody knew that they could get a gig at the Ash Street Saloon. And I remember our first gig was at the Ash Street. We had 6 songs. And when we were sound checking, it was in December, the Santa run had just happened. And it was like we were sound checking to a bunch of drunk, belligerent Santas.
Oh my gosh.
And
So
that was
Portland.
that was our first gig.
I had
But
one of
it
my
was-
worst gigs ever there once.
It was amazing though, because you could get decent photos and again, you know, you could get a gig there. They'd let you play as often as
Mhm.
you wanted because they had no pressure to, it was not ticketed. And anyway, so your town might have that kind of club, that one club that is very new, artist friendly. Figure out which one that is. Chances are other artists will know what it is. Here in Portland at that time, everyone would say, oh, you could get a gig at the Ash Street. So everyone knew that that was an easy get and a good starting point. So there's that.
Well, the other another point I think is important to mention, or a question to ask yourself, is what do you even want from your hometown? Because I have known of artists who this is mostly when I was living in Portland, but there'd be these people that were famous in the real world outside of Portland and had, you know, big music careers, but when they came home, no one locally cared or knew who they were really. And then there was the flip side. There were people who were just absolute local stars and everyone thought was like God's gift to music. But the minute they leave the Northwest, no one's ever heard of them. So that's kind of an interesting thing. But then the other thing is like, if I want to tour a lot, do I need this to be a place that's cheap to live because I'm never going to be here? Is it worth being in an expensive city where I'm going to try to make inroads? You know, there's just a lot of considerations for how this town and this home serves the rest of your musical endeavors.
Yeah, I when you were talking about that, I was reminded of going all the way back, I think to episode 3 or 4 with Dan Zanes, and he was talking about how he built concentric circles. Like he first started just in Brooklyn and then expanded and then it was more about New York City than the state and getting further and further out. So yeah, trying to think strategically about your home base. Are you wanting to build up in the scene? Are you just wanting an occasional gig that's tides you over for other touring? Yeah, it's, I think thinking about it and just understanding what you're really going after is helpful. Also because, you know, again, this is one of those areas where artists just kind of fall into bad patterns and habits. Like, well, just get gigs, I guess. And then they're not thinking strategically. They're not using the bad gigs to their strategic advantage. They just feel like they're just playing, bumping along, not really going anywhere. And it's like, no, have a plan and understand what you're trying to accomplish because there are different strategies based on that.
Well, and then also like if you have a local audience, there's things you can do with that. I mean, not just for yourself, but like you can then use that as a trade, you know, hey, we want to play in San Francisco. How about we book you a gig in Portland, Oregon, because I've got an audience I could bring, you know, so it gives you some like bargaining tools for other opportunities. But then again, if you're someone who's got 10 million followers on TikTok and you tour all the time, then you don't need to have that bargaining tool. You're clearly doing something else that's working. So, yeah.
And I think it's important to, at this juncture, to mention that your strategy for playing live may have nothing to do with getting big in your local scene. It might be that, hey, we just want some live content every once in a while to put on the web, because your strategy might be just for that.
Christina, you look shocked.
Oh, that hurt my heart.
Were you thinking he was going to say just to play live because that's nice?
Because it just feels your inner fire.
Well, that too. That
I mean-
too. I mean,
But
that
the
goes
idea
without
that
saying.
Somebody's just playing shows to create web content. It hurts my heart. I'm not judging you if that's your MO, but
We know they're out there, Christina.
oh God, that makes me feel old.
Yeah. But ideally, what I mean by that is that, yeah, they might be it's not just great web content, but it may not be to fill a tour schedule or to
Sure.
be playing 4 times a month. It might just be, hey, we like playing live and we do it enough to make that a part of the story. It's more, I'll take it from that angle, but it might be that you just want live footage so your music videos look cool.
I do think that there's something to also, yeah, like what you're saying, recognizing what your strategy is and if there even needs to be a strategy with performing. Some people just want to, I haven't performed in a long time. I just want to play a show. It doesn't need to be every week for the next 3 years of my life, but just like one show would be really nice, you know? And so I think that there's definitely people that are just trying to break into the local scene because they want to meet a community or because they want to foster that, you know, artistic and performance itch. They want to like keep themselves going as a musician. It doesn't mean that you need to hustle your way to the top or claw your way out of your town or figure out how to make it big in, you know, the largest cities in the country. So if you're one of those people that's just looking to play a show, it is so manageable. Just follow these tips.
Well, the next section is about finding people to play with because I couldn't go and I could do a solo show, which is its own thing. You know, you still have to pitch yourself to venues, but I'm pretty portable. But if you need a band or if you need an orchestra or whatever, how the heck do you find people to play with or to work with as producers or engineers or whatever? Just how do you find people?
Oof. Is Craigslist still a thing?
Oh my, when I moved to Oregon, it was slightly before the MySpace days. And I used to read the classifieds in the Mercury.
Mhm.
Like, and it'd be like, you know, guitarist seeking indie rock band. And then you'd try out like 50 people and they'd all be basket cases. And then you'd find one after like a year and they'd join your band.
Yeah.
So it was all worth it. But oh my God, that was inefficient.
Well, there are some things that have gone away that frustrate me to this regard. Like you've got read liner notes on here. With the removal of that from the music experience, that's frustrating at times, especially as it relates to local scene, because typically it's like, oh, a good way into the local scene is what are the recording studios that people that are making albums in your town are using. That might be easy to find. It might be harder to find. Who are the people playing on those records? All those things are good clues of connecting points and understanding where people are hanging out or the groups that people are involved in.
The number one clue, though, is just go to a show and see the bands that are playing and then go up to those bands and say, do you want to join my band?
Your band's okay. My band's going to be awesome.
No, I mean, let's be real. Most musicians are usually in like 5 or 6 projects, right? So, I mean, some of the best ways is just going consistently to shows, like we're saying over and over again. Support your local scene, meet the people, do the investigative work. And then, you know, if you see that Beach Boys cover band and you love their bassist and you're starting your own Tom Petty cover band, then go ask that bassist to be in it. It's not that hard. They might reject you and they might not at the end.
Well, and speaking of being in 5 different bands, like joining someone else's band really can be a great place to like eventually get people into your band because you just make friends, you meet more people. When you're talking about the disappearance of liner notes, I've noticed on Instagram and somewhat on TikTok, but mostly on Instagram, it can be like a pretty good place to see what bands are working in what studios. And then if they have like hired gun musicians or whatever, like a lot of times there'll be video of those people with a tag and you can be like, oh, I like that accordion solo. Let me write to that person on Instagram or whatever.
Yeah.
It's not nearly as concise, but it works.
No, it's not. Some other tips like local music scene forums or Facebook groups. You might have a local music organization, like here in Portland, we have Music Portland, which is really trying to kickstart. It's existed for a while, but they're trying to put new life into it post-pandemic and really organize the music business scene here in the Portland area. So something like that might be happening in your town. It depends on the city, you know, but there might be those organizations that exist that you haven't figured out yet. Musician unions and all those kind of things can be connection points for you to find other people.
Coworkers.
Yeah. If you work at CD Baby,
that's
chances
how I
are.
got. That's how I got a lot of bandmates. Actually, Pony was in my band for a long time, playing bass.
Well, there's also kind of the question of: are you trying to make an actual band that stays together and always works together with the same people, or are you fine having like hired guns for some particularly big important gig? And I don't think either one is correct, but I have noticed in my life when I have been like, well, I don't have a band, but I'll put one together for this event. They usually end up being in my band. Like if they enjoy it and you like them, it basically can become your band. Sort of, it's like the soft sell version of, hey, join my band.
Yeah.
I also think, to go a little more analog to outside of the digital world, flyers still exist. People still pull the tab off of the flyer at the coffee shop. If you're in a small town where, like we were talking, maybe a huge music community isn't super available to you like in your periphery, going to sources like that and just putting up a flyer saying, I'm looking for a guitar player, I guarantee you will get a phone call. It might be from a weirdo. It might be from some guy who's been really, really great practicing in his basement and hasn't played a show in 30 years. Regardless, like, you're going to find somebody, they're going to reach out. I've done that one too. I've done it all.
That kind of leads into the next grouping of points that we have, where building a realistic picture of what your town's culture and expectations are. So this I think is where the size of your town is drastically going to impact some things, whether it's all original music, like cutting edge or traditional, whether it's jams and kind of loose, or if it's tight and professional. Cover songs at a sports bar, that might be a lot of your main options. I know artists doing that. The smaller your town, the more restrictive the existing scene can be, which could present some opportunities if you're creative, or it could be a challenge to work with. So one thing that's interesting, I live in a small town called Camas, Washington. I mean, we're just right across the river from Portland. I actually live closer to the Portland airport than most Portlanders, so it's not like I'm out in the middle of nowhere. But it is a very small town vibe with the old Main Street and all that. I noticed that as we emerged from the pandemic, a lot of the tap rooms, because we love beer here, multiple tap rooms, they started having live music and started acting more like a regular music venue. And I thought, oh, this is interesting to see. Is it because of the pandemic, people kind of got used to staying closer to home and wanted some music? And it seems to be working and thriving, but it was just something that I saw emerge in my small town from all these different, they're not professional venues. They're nice tap rooms or places where lots of people are hanging out, but music has been a very successful addition for a couple of them. And it's been interesting to watch. So you may be able to help foster some of that in your small town. So don't just sit around expecting everybody else to have already created this infrastructure. You could help create that and be a big part of it.
It's almost more intimidating being in a town with unlimited resources for entertainment, living in LA now, having come from Portland, Oregon, where Portland was a big town for a lot of the country, but it still felt like you knew everybody. Like, you sort of like created a community where you knew the other artists. And then coming to a big city like this, where there's so much and the entry point feels like limitless, it's almost more intimidating and paralyzing. And so talking through some of these things now, I'm realizing, like, focus, like you said, concentric circles. Focus where you are now and then start building around that. If you're in LA and you're in, Santa Monica, start there and then start building outwards. I'm just giving myself advice while we're talking.
No, that's good, because I agree. I went to Nashville for college. So I moved there for college. I didn't move there just cold and to make it in music. So I had a major connecting point built in. And I would see people move to town, and Nashville is much bigger now than it was back then, and think, how on earth does somebody come to a town like this just out of the blue and show up and get connected? Because I feel like if you're in an industry town like LA, New York, or Nashville, that it can be very intimidating, that the pressure could be to like skip steps.
Right.
That just those first strategic moves and the research. No, you don't have time for that. You need to be famous now, or you need to be playing that hot club now. And I feel like that could be overwhelming.
And I think what those steps are differs too, because like I think of Nashville as a town of crisp technical players. They're all monster players. That doesn't interest me. Like
Mhm.
I loved being in Oregon, where it's like you could be terrible at your instrument, but also at the same time be extremely creative and original. And I actually, in reality, I think there's a good middle ground between those two
Mhm.
things. And Portland, I
was-
think in our time, leaned too far one way, and Nashville probably the other. But it just means like what your expectations even are could be different. Now the town I live in, like, hey, being like, hey, can I play an hour of my own songs? Most venues like don't want that. They're used to just having cover music at the sports bar type stuff.
Yeah.
So anyways, yeah.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I think in those situations, like what you mentioned, like Chris, that a lot of them just want the cover songs at the sports bar, and I'm know somebody that's in doing a lot of those gigs right now. I think there's still an opportunity for you as an artist to play along, but then also educate the establishment, where
Absolutely.
you can say, hey, how about a night I curate some artists and we do original music and we make a big deal about it. I mean,
Mhm.
there's ways to get that local establishment that really is just trying to have, it's just an attraction, an extra
Right.
attraction that they can put on their website saying, hey, we've got live music. And how can you turn it into something that becomes an event for them that isn't necessarily going to change? Now everything they book is original music, but you can use that place that has established patterns of music and get creative and work with the people to do something more than just cover songs in front of the sports bar.
I think once what you just touch on something, which is that once you stop sort of like seeing the booking agents as like these gatekeepers to your success, and you recognize that they're people that are also just trying to pay the bills for their venue and their establishment, and you offer them something that will bring value to their business, and you sell it like that, your event or your performance or whatever, you're going to have a much easier time sort of navigating that landscape. So saying, listen, I'm going to do a open mic, or not an open mic, but like a songwriter trivia night. We're going to have like 35 to 50 people coming out, and that's like 35 to 50 people coming to your bar that you may not have on a Tuesday night, and selling that over to them as something of value that they otherwise would just be a dead night for them.
Yeah.
I feel like that's a good segue into the next point, because you're basically talking about working with the venue to make it a success. And I think once you get to the point where you're actually booking events or gigs early on, you have to know it's important to try to make them all feel like events, get as many people there as possible, coworkers, family, friends, whoever, because if they're not your true fans, and they probably won't be because they're your friends and coworkers, they're going to dry up eventually. Like you can't keep, what do we say? Can't keep returning to the same well. So you don't want to overbook yourself. You don't want to overextend your welcome with this early audience.
Right.
So you kind of want to make events feel special for the venue, for your audience, for yourself, so they can snowball, but not in a frequency way, more in just things feel, I don't know, more and more exciting.
Yeah, there's that balance too of like not playing enough so that you're not like fully practiced or like polished, your performance. But then there's the like playing too much that nobody wants to come anymore because you're playing like 3 shows a night or 3 shows a week, and then like the best show of that week is getting ignored. So finding that balance, because I remember wanting to say yes to absolutely everything, and then at a certain point when you start to say no, you're like, you feel guilty, like, oh, do I deserve to say no?
I'm never going to get another gig.
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah.
It's okay to say no.
Well, and also this is a critical area where a lot of people make mistakes early on, where, and I've had this happen with the opening bands that we enlisted, where they say, oh, every time we play, we get 150 people out. Find out they had played once or twice. And it's because they literally begged everyone they knew to come to the show. But those people weren't going to come every time. Their family and friends and coworkers will come maybe once every 6 months, if that. But it's like they motivated everybody on that one show. You cannot use that as your metric or your baseline of your fans that come to your shows.
Or
That
they
will get-
do, or they do have a huge audience, but unfortunately for you, the show they booked with you was 2 nights after this other monster show they played.
Right.
What
had
were you
that all.
thinking?
I've had all that happen.
Did you guys ever have to play one of those shows where they gave you like 50 tickets in advance that you had to sell or else you weren't going to get paid?
Yes,
once,
once.
never
Was
again.
it at the Hawthorne Theater?
Yes.
Yeah.
I
That
think
happens.
for me, it was at the Paris Theater. Is that still
Yeah.
a place in Portland?
It is now. Yeah.
But it's
Not the same thing. Yeah, one of those where they're like, here's a set number of tickets. If you don't sell all these tickets, then we won't pay you anything. In fact, you'll owe us money.
That happens a
Don't
lot
do
on
that.
all ages shows, and yes, be very wary of those because
You
you
should
end up
not have to
having
pay to
sell
play.
tickets to your friends, and it's very uncomfortable. But yeah, so just really understanding your audience, who it is. Don't overpromise. Don't book too many shows because those folks aren't going to come out 5-6 times a month. If that's who you're relying on, don't tell the booker that 100 people come every night. If that was just literally you forced everyone you know to be there, and that's not going to be your consistent draw. Just, really look at it like, how am I using this to build a story and experience and connection in this town and not overpromise and burn bridges? I mean, if you do get that gig and you convince everyone to come out, make sure you're getting photos and video and all that, because part of this, again, said earlier on, is building a resume that you do play live, that you are connected to the scene. And if that's what your goal is to really start building a touring schedule or just a consistent schedule in your city, having that resume and those videos and photos that people see that, oh, they do take the stage professionally. They do have played shows in front of people. They're not going to be a disaster, because all that helps tell the story about who you are as an artist.
Just one last thought I had on this is that once you feel like you've built your audience to a sufficient place where you can like branch out and start trying to tackle other cities, maybe in your region, you can almost start to have the opposite problem where you kind of ignore your hometown a little bit, or maybe it's been a year since you've done a gig. And I think it's important to do two things: book a gig and remind your fans to come back out and get excited, but make it worth their excitement. So debut a new album or do your same old songs, but with costumes and rocket ships. I don't know, like make it feel like a totally new experience.
You should absolutely always be honoring the people that helped build you to where you are now. And if that's your hometown, absolutely don't ignore them. If you have a tour, you start and end it at your hometown and you make sure that they get the full experience, right? Like it's a bummer seeing artists that like completely forget where they came from.
Yeah. Making shows special is absolutely something you should do and think about. I think, again, so many artists just go through the motions when they're playing shows, and there's people that go to your show locally. They may like it. They may like your music, but it's like, are they seeing anything different? Is there any surprises or interesting takes on it? I mean, one thing, Chris, that you did that I think is applicable here with like breaking into your local scene. I mean, you were already playing in Portland for many years at this point, but when you did the residency where you played for a whole week at a place, a lot of artists could have just said, hey, I'm playing every night this week. It would have been the same thing every night. No reason to come back. But I loved how you had on the calendar specific themes for each night. So people knew that, hey, if they came on Tuesday and loved it, Thursday, it'll be something different and unique. And they know, and they know. And I loved how you had local artists on the bill with you or participating with you each night that also tied in a lot of other fan bases, because what you did in the marketing that I thought was so great is you featured them instead of yourself. And half the time the battle that we face is trying to get the other artists to promote the show who aren't the headliner. And I'm like, that's brilliant. Make the pictures and all the information about them. Then they'll be forced to share it and email about it.
It helps us get over that thing where we're like, oh, I don't want to promote my show. But if you think of this as, oh, this is my chance to promote my friend who's also playing this show, you get over all your hangups about marketing. So that
It's
was helpful.
also an excellent way to get a new audience. We're talking about residencies, which for those that don't know, is generally when you have like a week, or sometimes maybe it's a 1 week, one Thursday every month, or every Thursday, or maybe it's just an entire week in a row where you get to just have the stage. And we've all done these. I think they're an amazing opportunity, like you said, to highlight other people. It's also a really great opportunity to get artists who may have even larger audiences than you doing something unique. They're doing an intimate show. Maybe it's a solo show. Maybe they're going to do something completely acoustic. Maybe they're, a punk rock band and they're going to try like a jazz night or whatever. But you ask them to do something a little bit different, to have a draw for their show while also promoting you. So incredible opportunity to sort of like capture other audiences as well.
Yeah, and since we're kind of talking about like reciprocity, that was another point that we had, is that a way to break into a scene sometimes might not originate with your own music. It might be that you're a good photographer, or you're a web designer, you're a good writer, so you can help someone write bios or show reviews. Like, you might have a lot of other skills to offer and trade, or simply just use to meet people, even if you're getting paid for it. Work in the scene with those skills.
You work at CD Baby and you understand how distribution works.
I'm getting the
Early
sense
days.
that everyone's met all their musical friends at CD Baby.
Yeah.
Well, the early days of CD Baby were pretty crazy. I think like at that point, 90% of the staff were actively in bands playing, and people would disappear and go on tour and not even ask for time off.
We used to have some really great artist showcases, employee showcases.
Those are great.
Yeah.
Good times.
Yes.
Still do.
Good.
Still have good times.
All right. We have one more section here. Like, what can you offer? Oh, you just talked about that, Chris. What you can offer the scene.
The last one is about press and blogs. So we already said read the local weeklies and all that stuff. But I was going to say, don't ignore the unhip publications. Like, I know, like Kevin, you've talked about going to like a neighborhood newspapers and stuff that we would normally overlook. But when you go to those places, they're psyched to cover music.
Yeah, oftentimes the unhip publications, which every town has them, they are like thirsty for this kind of story. It's just not their area of expertise. So oftentimes, or to feature an artist or make some sort of connection to how you fit in the community. So those can be opportunities for you to get some local press, just kind of get your name out there, start building again that resume and connection with press people that are in the area. It's always okay to offer to take them out for a coffee or a drink, just to kind of hear their thoughts on the local scene. Usually press people will love freebies and will love to talk about what they like about the music scene or what they don't like about the music scene. So, look, those people are people too, and they've got a job to do. So, don't forget to just treat them like individuals, not just throw a pitch at them every time you want something from them.
That part.
Yeah, and then whether we're talking about hip or unhip publications, make sure you get them the information they need very early. Try to make it feel important and exciting. And on the flip side of that, let's say you do get some press and it's negative, which probably has happened to all of us. Don't worry, it's not going to kill you. We've talked on this podcast a lot about suffering the insults of bad press and it wounding us, and we get back on the horse, and sometimes we're better for it.
I want to hear everyone's bad press.
Well, now you just go tell all your fans to cancel them, and it takes care of the problem.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
There you go. Mine was shrieking vocals.
The one I got here in Portland, and it very much encapsulates the vibe of the scene in town at the time, was that they literally said in the album review that it sounded too good and our guitars were too tuned. And
the most Portland review ever.
Too professional.
Oh my gosh, not grungy enough.
And that was at the time where, I would just be happy if I saw a band that actually clipped all the guitar strings off the ends of their guitar that they weren't like flailing around like about to poke everybody in the eye. It's like, we're too cool to truly tune our guitars and cut the strings off the ends, you know.
We have some friends that are. I have some friends that are releasing an album this week. I'm actually going to Portland tomorrow to go see their album release, and a lot. Wanted to help them out a little bit, so I sent out a few emails to some local publications, and I was actually very surprised that some of even the larger publications were like, "Thank you so much for reaching out. We don't have a lot of content this week. This is a great thing to put on our events calendar. We're absolutely going to write up about it." And then they did, and they wrote like really great reviews about the music that was about to come out and pointed everyone to this show. So even if you think there's no way, there's no point in reaching out to this publication, they're not going to care, please do, because they're just like every business that we're talking about, needing to put something out or needing to like create a buzz or needing to, create a consistency with their programming.
Yeah, or they may feel like they're in a rut and they need something interesting that's outside of their the same lane that they've been in the whole time. So yeah, just you got to do it respectfully and understand they're a person doing a job, and your last minute whims for press coverage are not what their job are. It's not their job description to handle that for you. So treat them respectfully and like people that are doing a job, and understand what they want and need, and you will have far more success.
I feel like since everyone else outed themselves with bad press, I have to give my quote. Which
I was waiting for it.
For my first band in Oregon, what would they say? A zine read snooze fest cluttered with pretentious illusions.
That's awesome. I would put that on. I would like make that a carousel on Instagram. Like put that right up there.
The headline of your website.
Yeah, and then I put out a bunch of music that they loved, like. But then at some point, like in 2010, I got a review that was like, "This album's really good, but there's this one song where it sounds like John Mayer." And that was like the worst they could do at that point. So
yeah,
no, that's not bad.
So, yeah, I've had a lot of reviews like that. I wouldn't necessarily call them, I don't know. To me, it's more just like the reviews, especially for small town poets, that it just feels like a lot of them were just lazy.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're always trying to compare it back to our first album, which was our biggest. So it's like, can you move on? We moved on years ago. We give you permission to move on. Can you just actually listen to this for what it is and not be kind of, well, how does this compare to the first album? So that always frustrates me. But
also, don't forget that your bio, your pitch, your email to these writers are often where they're getting the bulk of their information if they are not actually listening to your music. So sometimes people write reviews, write descriptions for your upcoming show, or write descriptions for your upcoming release without even listening to the music. Remember that.
Copy and pasted.
So remember that when you're writing that information and putting that information out there, like PR and press, all that is basically hand delivering information for someone else to regurgitate.
Yeah. All right. Do we have any final thoughts about breaking into a local scene? We covered a lot of things. I think there's a lot of.
Be nice to everybody.
Oh, that's a
Do
good
not
one.
be the local jerk. Don't be the local person with the big ego and the big head and that's competing with everybody. The world is not against you. Just because there's someone out there that's doing something very similar as you in your scene doesn't mean that they're your competition. Sometimes they're actually like the best thing for you because you can team up with them. So be nice to everybody. You never know who is going to be a booking agent one day.
Oh, and also along those lines, be thankful if someone tells you no. If they get back to you and they're clear, like for one, you need to move on and explore another opportunity. But also it might not be no forever. It might be, no, I can't give you this gig, but write me back. Or maybe they don't tell you to write them back, but you can, don't walk away dejected and feel like the world's against you, basically. Like, just try again.
A no is just a speed bump.
Well, I mean, it is, again, I think with all this stuff, when you're trying to break into a scene, you're trying to crack a lot of codes on like, what do people like? Who are the players? Are they moody? Are they nice? When they say this, do they really mean that or what? And so to me, it's all information and data that helps you understand how to navigate a situation better. I'd rather have a club booker tell me no, so I can stop bothering them and know that, hey, if they don't want me, they'll tell me. So then I know, hey, with that person, I haven't heard back from them, so I should be following up. But yeah, it's very important that you are professional. You keep your pitches and introductions to these people very brief. But one thing I think, bottom line, that artists struggle with, that you're going to need to do well, is you're going to need to be able to describe your music. And that's something that I know a lot of artists struggle with. And you're going to need to do that constantly in all these situations because you're introducing yourself to new people. And so if you can't describe your music
we have a whole podcast episode about that.
Yeah, efficiently, or you have to take 2 paragraphs to describe your music. It's like you got to get good at the pitch, because a lot of these situations need a quick, here's who I am, here's what I do, here's how I can help solve a problem for you.
And don't be too greedy. Like, the best community member is somebody who gives back, not somebody who's just completely taking all the time. And that means be grateful for the opportunities you get, but also try to create opportunities for others. And if somebody, is playing a show with you, stay for the whole set. That's my 2 cents, is be a good community member. Like, stay for the whole set, for the whole show.
I got a
Don't
funny
leave.
story. That absolutely disgusting house show that I've mentioned earlier. I thought we were playing someone's house. I thought, I didn't know what to think. I get there and it is literally like this house that feels like it's barely standing. Inside, there's no furniture. It's all gross and looks like, it's been abandoned for a while, but somebody, I guess, lived upstairs. We played with another band from CD Baby, and we didn't know the situation, and we all had somewhere we had to be. It was an early show. It was like we went on at 6, they went on at 7. I think another band went on at 8. It was a weeknight, and we had to load out all through like the place where they were playing
during their set,
because the door was right there, and it was so uncomfortable. That was a situation where we had bad info. We didn't understand what we were getting into. We thought it was going to be a more casual vibe. And we ended up loading out in front of the next band that was playing. It was so awkward.
I mean, we've all been that band on the 6-band bill that is dead last at midnight, and nobody's staying, and no audience has stayed, but like maybe the opener stayed. And that's just like, thank God there's somebody here, so that I'm not doing this to myself, or to the bartenders who are like, too bad no one stayed for your really killer set. So,
well, I've actually had, you guys don't have to keep playing if you don't want to.
I've had that too. I also walked off a stage once at Ash Street because there was only like 2 people in the room, and one of them was talking on her phone the whole time. And then the other one yelled at her to get off her phone. And then I'm like over here playing my like sweetheart songs. And I was just like, okay, thanks.
You should have
finished the song really fast. And
no, you needed to finish that set for the woman who told the other woman to get off her phone.
I stayed for, it was one of those sets where you're like, I have 6 songs, but I'll play 5.
All right. Well, if you have anything to contribute to breaking into your local scene, if there's something that you've tried that's worked or you've tried that did not work, we'd love to hear about it. You can call our listener line at 360-524-2209, or you can email us at podcast@cdbabypodcast.com. And unless there's anything else, I think we should just dive into some of the calls and emails.
Let's do it.
All right. Let's see. Let's start. We're going to start with some emails. There's a couple that are longer, but we'll get through. Hello, Kevin and Chris. Thank you for the latest episode of the DIY Musician Podcast. I enjoyed it because some of the things have happened to us as well. And like Kevin, I also enjoy laughing at our misfortunes, because what else can we do? This is related to the horror story episode that we had right before Halloween. Kevin, thank you for recommending Music Pro Insurance. We've had gear stolen from our van as well. One night in Denver, Colorado, at a place called La Rumba, a guy took all our percussion instruments and then escaped riding a bicycle. Yes, a bicycle. I don't even know how he escaped so quickly on a friggin' bicycle with a set of bongos and drums on his back. And the worst part is that we were just 20 feet away by the venue's door. Wow, that's fast and efficient on however he got that on that bicycle. Anyway, last Saturday, I listened to the podcast about an hour before my other band and I were getting ready for our Halloween show at a house. The guitar player was washing long tequila shot glasses in the kitchen sink when suddenly, ouch, he broke one and cut his index finger right on the tip. The bottom of the sink turned red, and I screamed in horror as I saw all the blood coming out of my pal's finger. I was listening to musicians' horror stories, and now this, I yelled. Maybe I jinxed us all. Not to worry, it wasn't a deep cut, so I rushed to the rescue with some crazy glue and gaff tape. For anybody who doesn't know, small cuts can be cured with crazy glue. It sounds crazy, pun intended, but it's true. It's great for finger cuts because it seals the wound while keeping the skin flexible. If necessary, a Band-Aid can be applied on top for added protection, or in a pinch, gaff tape will work too. My advice to all my fellow musicians, always carry a first aid kit. In 2015, I decided to build my own kit using a 6-byte camping bag, which has traveled with the Jones Soriano band everywhere. We call it the Little Pharmacy. I wonder what else is in the Little Pharmacy. And it has been a great addition to our gear. And he sent a list of all the stuff to use. And lastly, he says, before I say goodbye, I don't think I ever thanked you guys for organizing the 2022 DIY Musician Conference. I know I saw Kevin at the party on Friday, and I did say thank you, but I never sent a formal note to thank you guys. Also, thank you for the jam room, which was great and full of energy each time. And he's wondering why there wasn't an electric guitar amp in the room. I don't know. Why did we not have an electric guitar amp? But that was from Roberto Ramirez. Thanks, Roberto. Thanks for those stories and those tips. Yes, crazy glue works. If you're a guitar player and you cut your finger, crazy glue that stuff.
I appreciated the story, even though my face was doing this the whole time.
Yeah.
Same.
I was doing a lot of wincing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's no good when you cut your finger, especially right before a gig. That's why I don't carry any of the stuff. I make other people carry it. I don't want to hurt my hands.
Delicate little hands.
All right. Let's see. Oh, here's a good one. These first couple aren't necessarily questions. Hey guys, I want to just share a thought. You said it's welcome to. Recently, I hear a lot about this discouraging, you're still doing this music thing on the podcast. Have you thought about making a funny topic out of it at the end of every episode, the same way as the ones about spam messages? For example, we can gather the most pissing off phrases. As for myself, I have one you might like. My parents and family support me in general. Well, what you gonna do with me? I went through music college and conservatory, but they weren't positive about making it on my own. And sometimes they were saying with the best possible for them care in their heart, well, okay, you didn't make it. Let's find something else. That always strikes me as a riddle that I cannot explain to them. How can one conclude that this is a finish line? It's just a process. If you're interested in collecting phrases like that, this one is his 5 cents. Another example, everybody can suggest a good answer to the most popular phrases. Like if somebody says to me, I stopped interacting with people without purpose, so I don't hear that much. Oh, wait, that was like a side note. Oh, you're still doing that music thing? I would say, nope, I'm already doing this music thing, and let them figure it out on their own. So there we go. We could get some responses to because I think we already know all the phrases people say, like, oh, you're still doing that music thing, or haven't you made it? Or
I would say, are you still doing this eating thing? You still doing that living thing?
You still got that boring job nobody cares about.
Exactly.
Are you still in accounts receivable?
No shade to anyone in accounts receivable.
No. Sorry, accounting people.
Some people like numbers. Yeah. Anyway, let's jump to a song. That's funny. Let's jump to a call. We've got a couple calls. Let's jump to one of those and break up the emails. This one is about a scam. So here we go. Here is a scam email.
Hiya, my name is Ostella with a 0. I was just calling to let you know about possibly another scam going around on Instagram. There's a guy who dropped in my DMs posing as a writer for Billboard magazine, asking me for $157 as a fee to get an article written about independent music artists in Billboard magazine. When I pressed him about it, and I was like, I've never paid for press, blah, blah, blah. He's like, well, it's not going in my pocket, it's going to management. It's management fee for a placement fee. Anyway, hopefully you have heard of it, or maybe you haven't, and you can let some people know about it. All right, thanks very much. Bye-bye.
Thanks for the call. Yeah, no writer from Billboard that wants to keep their job is going to be soliciting bands for $157.
Never happens.
for a placement fee that goes to their management. No. Thank you for sharing that. If someone does that, you should hit the report thing on that message, because that person is scamming people. One of the things that is a common thread with these scam messages is they always seem to have weird dollar amounts. People don't come up with a price for that kind of thing for $157.
I wondered what the 7 was for.
$199.99 or something.
It'll be a round number, or something like what Chris just said. So Billboard writers are not reaching out to artists soliciting magazine articles, so don't fall for it. And Billboard doesn't just write about random artists, so that's another thing you should know. Billboard is very much a tool of the mainstream industry typically, so it's going to be about some milestone related to sales or a landmark release or something. It's not going to be, hey, we've got this page with a random artist written on it.
Hey, I know that you haven't released an album in 2 years, and you haven't released anything in 2 years, and your Spotify has just been sitting, but we would love to write an article about you.
There's literally nothing exciting going on in your life right now. Can we write about it?
But we would.
It's
you
a
just
challenge.
seem interesting.
We're looking for the most uninteresting artist career at the moment and see if we can make it sound interesting.
Same thing with those Spotify. I get those like Spotify for artists emails that are like, we want to add you on Rap Caviar. And I'm like, first of all, I don't make rap. Second of all,
I'm
not going to pay you for that. Yeah, you're not Spotify.
Yeah, I've had artists forward a few of those on to me. Those have been harder to share because there's not really content in the email. But it basically is just, it says, hey,
you've been added to this playlist.
And whenever you link through, they want you to pay for something else. All right. We're going to do, because we've got 2 more emails. We're going to do emails and we'll finish with a call. Hey there. I've loved your show for years. Thanks for all you do. The Halloween show was especially entertaining. I think this is a quick question. When pitching a song to Spotify before it's released, how important is the added description field? Spotify asks to tell us about the process of creating this song and to explain any plans to promote it. Is this something that Spotify employees are actually looking at? Is the algorithm searching this for some magic password that will get my song in front of more people? Thanks, Josh from Crash Cadet. And I think we talked about this recently and had a similar question.
We did. So since then, since you and I talked about it in a recent episode, I went to that Spotify for Artists masterclass or whatever they're calling it, where their curator, their editorial team presented what they do. And it absolutely does matter. And given that they get 100,000 tracks a day, no, they're not doing something with all of it. But when they like the music and when something reaches their radar, crosses their radar, those descriptions can make a huge difference in whether they want to dig in further.
The drivers, as they call it, is basically just they want to know that you're also putting some weight behind this release. So sometimes the people at like in the editorial playlist portion of Spotify or whoever's like on that side of the DSP just wants to know that this artist is like putting a little bit of leverage behind the release so that it's not just like some release that's going to sit there completely like unnoticed. So that's where a lot of those questions come in. Just the curiosity of what are you going to be doing with this? Are you putting marketing behind it? Are you, touring it, etc.?
Yeah, and you don't need, I can't remember how many, there is I think a cutoff on how much you can put in there. You're not putting in a book here. So try to think, to me, this is whether or not anyone at Spotify sees it, this is good for you to do because then you'll have it for the release. Like it'll be a quick description. It'll be like maybe something interesting about the music process and how you're promoting it. Being able to say those things quickly is helpful, especially describing the music because being able to describe how this release is different than the last one and being able to pitch it to your fans, even it just forces you to do that. I do know, and I think we did say in that last episode where this question came up, that if you work with our stages program and you are pitching, where they do pitching to all the DSPs, they absolutely have to have this. And that's some of the things that get it on the radar is like, oh, we have this cool campaign that's going to drive a lot of traction to our Spotify page. Well, Spotify is going to like that. Apple Music may not. Apple Music wants to hear about how you're sending fans to Apple Music. So those kind of things are what they look for at times. And yeah.
I've been on the other side of that through the stages program, like promoting some of these artist releases, and they respond higher to those that have those things going towards them. But that's usually when you're at a certain point. I think at the majority of us, they just want to know the story.
Yeah. Something interesting. If you can't think of anything interesting about the new music you're releasing, why should they find it interesting?
Like you said, it's also an opportunity to force you to do this work that you need to be doing anyway, whether it's for Spotify or it's for your audience and how you're going to market your music. You have to do that work at some point. So,
yeah. All right. Next up, my name is Greg, and I'm a New Jersey-based musician writing, performing under the name Yupanki. I hope I pronounced that right. It's Yupanki. Love the podcast. I'm super happy to have stumbled across this after a friend referred me to CD Baby to release my project's debut EP this past August. It has been a huge help in learning some best practices to get music out into the world. I was listening to your most recent episode, number 321, Everything After the Music, and I forgot who made the joke about people not having time for art, but it gave me a good entry point for a question. I've been trying to find an appropriate time and context to reach out through. And then he says, just a warning, it's a bit lengthy. He's giving backstory. I'll go through it quickly. I'm a solo musician, and my sound is loop-based guitar instrumentals, blending genres like ambience, post-rock, alternative, and dipping into experimental spaces with the gamut of effects and Latin rhythms that make their way into the mix. The music tends to be slow burn, as 95% of the music is played looped live. But once things get going, the resulting sound coalesces into what others have described to me as cinematic. The no time for art joke comes in at this point. The project was birthed from wanting to add ambient sound loops to an audio element to my painting practice. He's also a visual artist. After a brief stint with gear acquisition syndrome, he says, and exploring some sounds, the original intent of simple soundscape loops morphed into a more complex conceptual project that personified recurring themes in my artwork, and I started writing poetry, short stories to world build a story following the character along with some illustrations, basically encompassing all the art forms I'm passionate about within one project. I think with all that being said, you can see why I'm reaching out for some advice from you folks. There's definitely a lot going on, which I feel many people might be overwhelmed by if I promoted this as a complete music and art package. Where do I start with marketing that? I'm worried about losing people too quickly if I deviate too far from music in any marketing or pitches. I've played it safe and keep music as the primary topic when reaching out to venues, with only a very brief mention of the written element since it coincides with the EP. My intention is for each element, music, written, and artwork, to be able to stand independently, but for the audience to be aware of the others, should they choose to follow the story. Should I continue promoting a more music-centric pitch so that I can cast a wider net before I accidentally get too granular with picking an audience, or have a pitch for music and another for written art element that I can switch between for venues, bookers that go for that sort of conceptual multimedia project? And he goes and working on a poetry book. And let's see, finish up here. I'm still in the early stages of the project, so I know I still have a good amount of work to do. And am I being careful with pacing myself and being selective of the venues I accept show offers? Thanks to cautionary tales you've shared on your podcast, I've avoided getting roped into a few door deal shows where I would have to pay almost $200 up front and only get reimbursed based on how many people come out for my set. Yeah. So anyway, what are your thoughts there? That's a kind of an interesting question. We haven't had that one before that I can think of, where there's this multimedia experience that is really a part of their vibe, but is it too much when it comes to music? Is it,
You gotta pick your venue. You got to pick the right venue for that. We've definitely had experiences where artists are trying to shove too much into the wrong space. There's not enough time to like fully set up this entire multimedia experience for like a, variety show or whatever. So picking the right space for that and making sure that you're creating an intentional space for that sort of, I love a multimedia performance. I'm like a huge, huge nerd for that, but you have to know when the right time is.
Yeah, I was thinking that like it's such a differentiator from every other musical act out there. There might be some merit to keeping it that sort of full, like multi-dimensional thing. But then, as you're saying, that also limits your options if you just want to be out there playing, in which case all the other stuff might be nice supplemental extra marketing stuff for your audience to kind of build the world more. But yeah, I don't know.
Or create two options. Create your pub option, right? Like your pub option probably isn't going to have all of those elements to it. But then have your like full stage show for those more intentional performance spaces.
I guess my question is, if he's doing cinematic, however he described his music, is there a pub option? Like, is that going to work in a pub setting?
Yeah, that's a great point.
In which case, why not only do it when you can fully do it?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I think there's probably having some prepared variations that are ready to go that you can pitch. I think when I was reading this, to me, all I can think of is like, this is something where it's critical to have a good website with good visuals that really show what you're doing, because I think it could be hard for people to understand. Like, I read the email and I still am not 100% sure what the art and the spoken word aspect of it is. Like, because at first I was thinking, well, maybe he's painting on stage. Like, well, he's playing guitar or looping guitar stuff. I'm like, I don't know how he's playing. So it's like, how does that work? Having good documentation and so people can see it and understand how it differentiates you, I think is important. But
it sounds like the type of thing he should really just be going to, like art spaces. Like in Portland, Maine, there's a place called the Space Gallery that has a stage. It's a performance, but it's really for all that multimedia, somewhat.
It also comes back to this whole episode, which is about finding your community in your community and finding the people that are also doing similarly like experimental or performative things and building scenes with them. Like building the space if it doesn't exist, or building the weekly or monthly residency if that doesn't exist for these sorts of like crazy experiments. So that then that just continues to build, but now you're doing it together and you're creating an audience for it.
Agreed.
Yeah, I think the easy takeaway is that don't pitch this to sports bars that want cover bands.
Right.
That's not
Definitely.
any place that is that kind of environment. Even if they allow original music, that's probably not the space for you.
They don't get me. No, they get you. They just don't want you.
Yeah. Ooh,
Ouch.
been there.
Yeah.
Definitely
Yeah.
played those sorts of shows where they just want background music, and I don't know that I know how to do background because I'm so loud and like dramatic that when they've asked for that, I've just stopped. I didn't sing. I just play piano,
Mhm.
which compromises your whole thing, right? Like that's not who I am. I'm not just a piano player. So it's sort of like it's okay to take gigs if you need the money or if you want to say yes because it's like the venue you've always wanted to say yes to and have to shift your live performance a little bit to meet those needs. But I also, like you said, Chris, like why even take them if you're not going to get to fully be your full creative self? So
yeah, that's a good question. Something that's interesting to think about. If anyone else has advice or is doing something that is a multimedia type experience that feels more like an artistic expression, that I would love to hear what you're doing to get gigs or where you're playing. But those art spaces feel like the right kind of vibe. All right, we've got one last call to close things out, and here we go.
Hi, my name is Kurt. I'm a singer-songwriter-composer under the name The Broadest Blue, and listening to the podcast for several years now. I've got a question about some ideas I have for my new album. There are a few tracks, and one track in particular that I want to do this the most, that is use sound effects. Last week, I got really geeked up about vinyl records that are sound effects collections. I ordered a handful from a seller in England, and I ordered some from a seller in Germany. And my idea was, especially on a track called The Four Horsemen, where I've set the four horsemen of the apocalypse to music, I thought I'd like to have some horse sounds in the background, and I thought it would be fun and make for a cool Instagram video if I could be seen with the engineer ripping the sound effects from the vinyl record onto the recording. So I thought it'd be cool to watch, and I also just like that it's going to sound older. Most of these are from the 60s. Then I realized I maybe shouldn't have jumped into this because I don't know about the copyright laws related to this. I know there's one aspect of some of these being over 50 years old, and I don't know if that's relevant here. But also on the other hand, if you can't use them in recordings, why do they put these out? So please help me out. These would be in the background alongside the music, not in place of the music, and they'd be mostly as is. They wouldn't be really processed very much. Anyway, thanks.
Yeah, interesting situation. So old vinyl sound effect records, which I've seen. I may even have one.
I have a few.
It is weird. Like, why do they make them? Because what was the point when they made them? Was it just to go, oh, that's what a horse sounds like? I mean, because you couldn't do anything with it. But
it was probably
yes.
a lot easier to get away with doing stuff with it before we became completely like digital,
Yeah. Well, I'm sure. Yes, those are still copywritten. So those would still be protected under copyright. The chance of someone that owned that copyright of that effects vinyl from 50 years ago has put it in content ID is probably zero. I
don't know about that though. Think about it. Like if somebody looped that into their record and they put it up on CD Baby 20 years ago, and it's now like through the content ID system. I mean, we've got so many submissions, with 100,000 submissions a day. It's very likely that somebody may have found that exact same sound effect.
That's true. I mean, but I'm talking about the original copyright owner.
Sure.
Whoever put that out 50 years ago probably isn't rushing to get their horse sounds in content ID. But who knows? Who
Maybe
knows?
not.
Who knows?
There's a niche for everything.
Who knows? So the short answer is yes, that's still under copyright. You need to get permission to use it. I would recommend trying to find some other horse sounds.
Make your own horse sounds.
He liked them because they're vintage sounding,
Mm-hmm.
like from the vinyl. Yeah. There's certain things that just feels weird to have copywritten, like the sound of a horse. Can we agree that a horse sound should not be copywritten?
I mean, there might be a way to manipulate it enough, but I do think that you are running a risk. If it's been recorded, you're running a risk.
And the chance of finding out who owns that and properly licensing it is probably also 0.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the challenge with that. So I hope that's not too much of a bummer to hear.
I had some very bad
Chris was going to say do it anyway, which was probably what I would have said.
Well, no, it was one step short of that, which is to put it in a video that you upload somewhere to an unnamed video platform as an unlisted or private video to simply see what happens. Does a sonic fingerprinting technology actually recognize it?
We're so punk rock.
There you go. See, Chris just gave you the hack.
And if it does recognize it, then I don't know what you do. But if it doesn't,
also,
not legal advice. Do your own research.
This has not been approved by YouSchmoob.
Hey, that is a good way to check. And in fact, I had someone reach out to me that was doing a piano master class and was wondering if one of the songs would trigger Content ID. And I did not know, especially because it was a live, like hour-long thing that was being streamed. That was the reason why I didn't know if Content ID would catch it in the live stream or after the video was done. It did. It was a Depeche Mode song, I believe. But, so it's usually pretty quick, but sometimes it might take a while for it to recognize something. But with horse sounds, yeah, just upload them. That's a good test. If that'll let you know if someone's got it in the system somewhere. All right. That's going to do it for this episode.
Right.
If you've got a question or comment or something you want to contribute to the show, you can do so. You can call our listener line at 360-524-2209, or you can email us at podcast@cdbabypodcast.com. And we'll give you marginal legal advice. or just bad legal
advice.
It's not even marginal.
No. It's full on bad legal advice.
All right. Well,
see you next week.
Yeah. We got lots more episodes coming. Got a TikTok episode, another TikTok episode. TikTok just keeps rolling. So we got more of that.
2 TikTok episodes, actually, if we include the bonus episode.
That's true. But a lot of activity on TikTok these days. We got that coming up and lots more. So be sure to subscribe and we'll catch you next time.
See ya.